right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Covestro Arena at K2022. For the last time today, we want to talk about circular design. And we just, in the last panel, talked about the status quo. Where is circular design today? Now we want to talk about the visions. What does it need? What are the requirements, the expectations for new materials? Where is the new design thinking heading? What are the opportunities, but what are also the challenges involved? And we have an illustrious panel with us today. So let me get them up on the stage and then I'll introduce them to you. So guys, come on up and give them a big round of applause. Come on, guys. I know it's late. The end of the day, but we can give them all the energy. And step a little closer, because if you're too far in the back, we can't really see you. All right, so guys, very good. And I'll start with you, Rasa. Rasa Weber is a designer and head of design and founder of Studio Blonde and Bieber. Hello, Rasa.
Hello.
So you're presenting the designer generation, where we talk about the vision for new industrial design or product design in general and how to make it circular, how to close the loop. And then next to her is Chris Lefteri, also an internationally acclaimed designer with a lot of experience. I'm not going to say he knows everything about new materials, but a lot. And he just showed that in his talk before. But now, we want to talk about what are the visions when it comes to circular design, to new product design. And then we're very fortunate to have Markus Frentrop. He's global head of RAL Colors of the company RAL. Who does not know RAL? Okay, so we've established that. Everyone knows RAL. So good to have you.
Great to be here.
And then we have Hans-Ebert Stein. He's an industrial designer. He's I would say a generalist, a general designer of many things, and also works with Covestro. So he will represent Covestro on this panel now to talk about the industry perspective when it comes to circular design. All right, guys. So let's dive right into it. Let's find out where circular design is really heading. And to establish this, I want to find out, where do we stand right now? What are the challenges that are being solved by circular design, and what are the challenges that are not being solved? What are the challenges that you're facing? Rasa, do you want to start?
Yes, let's dive right into it. So I think you brought up a really good example, and I was thinking about this before. You were speaking about this ink that was made from diesel derivatives. And I do believe, if you talk about design and the question how to implement circularity into this loop, the question that I always ask myself, and I would like to ask it to you, is, are we not only doing symptom treatment here? Are the diesel derivatives actually something that we want to keep using as a resource for producing the future of materials?
Question.
I think that we should just try everything, and because we have to try and learn what works and what doesn't work. I would say maybe one challenge to your question was that, we talk about recycling and taking plastic waste and remaking it, but there is a whole supply chain of supply and demand, and the supply has to be there in order to facilitate this growing demand of recycled plastics. That, for me, I can see as a challenge.
Mm-hmm. So,
whether that's mechanical recycling or chemical.
Absolutely, yes. And Markus, you can bring in an important aspect, because we talked so much about new materials, plastics industry, recyclability. Now, you sort of represent the color aspect of it. When it comes to RAL, you have an important role when it comes to sustainability, because it's also part of what your company wants to achieve, and be fully sustainable and circular. So where do we stand, and what do we still need?
In terms of color, I think we have first of all, made a good progress. So if it comes to the transition from color to real materials, it's really important that all our suppliers, that means the vertical integration, understands that sustainability and circular economy is no longer something like a buzzword, but it's essential for us. I think the largest suppliers that we have changed their mindset already, so they understood. And so did the startups. We've seen, if you take a look around here at the trade shows, you see many, many startups that have fascinating solutions. But the point is that still we're in touch with a lot of medium-sized companies. And for them, it's really hard due to capacities, due to the mindset, due to the daily requirements. And so I think if it comes to the larger companies and the startups, the mindset for circular economy is already there. But if it comes to the what we call in German the Mittelstand, the smaller companies, it's still a way to go, and that's one of the requirements that we have to face.
So Hans, what's the role of Covestro specifically when it comes to advancing this vision, making this vision a reality, and working with designers together to make this a reality, from sort of idea to reality, put it into practice?
Yeah, as you mentioned before, I'm an internal designer of Covestro, and the important one is our headline, crafting together. That is the success we search for here on K-Fair. Yes, we offer a lot of opportunities, material opportunities, and we have a lot of first imagination of what we think for the next step in product.
So the visions are there.
That are visions, that are offers for in material forms. Mm. So that is what I think. It's a good place for designers to meet us here at K-Fair.
Would you agree, Rasa? Is that important? I mean, what do you expect from the industry? What is important for Covestro to do?
I'm maybe not in a position to say what I expect from the industry, but what I can say is what I expect from a young generation of designers. I'm also teaching in different institutions, and what I see currently happening is raising awareness not only in circularity and recycling, but also in the question of how these materials entangle with environments. What happens if plastic is washed into rivers? What happens if these rivers then transport microplastic into oceans? And how can we as designers deal with that? And here I must be critical, because I think it's not only symptom treatment. That means not only using microplastic that we have already produced from within oceans to recycle that, but the question is fundamentally, where are raw materials coming from these days? And I do believe that we could transition from a notion of mining resources, also mining in a circular way, to growing resources. So the question would be, how could you grow materials that are inherently not harmful for environments at all, that can be decomposed and that are grown within an ecology? And that's a super challenging question, and one that definitely pushes industries to a limit, because it's ground root research. But I do believe that only there we could find long-term solutions in terms of how to deal with this really complex network of relations.
Yeah.
Maybe one point to add to what Rasa said is, I think an important point to come up with solutions is collaboration. Collaboration not only in terms of designers to companies they've been working for years or something like that, but cooperating with startups, but also providing on a horizontal level to provide some kind of a platform where companies from different industries maybe gather and share information about product properties and materials. What I learned is that in terms of material, if you take a look what's in the other industry, what other companies are coming up with solutions, is often extremely valuable for me and for us as a company. But it's developed in a totally different industry. And that's one important point. We need to look beyond what's today in our business. So we need to look to the left and to the right to find new solutions.
Mm-hmm. It's quite interesting because, Chris, you mentioned this trend curve in your keynote, and trends can originate from different sources. Could be designers setting new trends, could be consumers, so that there's a trend in society that we see, could be the industry comes up with a new material. Why don't we do something with that? So how do we actually create these visions? It all needs to start with a certain vision, and is that something that we have to realize that we can no longer be just in our own little, in the basement and create that vision? We have to go out in the world and then, you know, look, like you said, look left and right, talk to each other and say, okay, why don't we sit together at a table and find the vision and create it together?
Absolutely. I mean, it can only happen through collaboration. But I think something that we've been hovering around and what we've been talking about at the moment is, so we're in this incredible venue, you know, the K, which is mainly big industry. You know, we have some startups, but I think what's interesting about the industry of material development is, in recent years, it's come from designers. There are as many innovations that have come from grown materials that design has pioneered either through taking waste from grown materials. I mean, for example, pineapple leather, for example, or using, you know, the waste from the orange drink industry to create new material. And I think this is coming from designers, but obviously a designer can't understand the chemistry, so they have to collaborate. But I think that there is this very interesting shift of who's, you know, where the technology is coming from, and it's no longer big chemical companies. It is, you know, from startups, from design, from creative industries.
But then again, I mean, it sounds so easy. Yeah, we just have to talk to each other, just have to collaborate, or we just, yeah. But it's, in many cases, it's just not happening. So what does it need? What are the challenges? How can we get together? How can we collaborate? Is it the size of the company? We say, okay, mid-sized companies, they maybe cannot afford to have a big R&D department and, you know, put a lot of money into, you know, new experiments. Is it the next generation of designers? Are they too timid or too limited in their thinking? Is it the slow industry? What is it? What are the challenges?
I think for big industries, the challenges are probably much greater than for the small, medium industries. I think, and not necessarily, let's not talk about the producers of the materials, but let's say the brand owners, the consumer brands. You know, there has to be a pathway that isn't just dealing with programs that are 6 months in, you know, from production or 12 months production, but actually it's a much longer term investigation in building these networks that allow for you know, emerging technologies to be implemented and tested now, not just before you're ready to go into production.
Yeah, Rasa, what do you think?
I guess it's obvious that we are facing kind of a critical moment, industrially speaking, in general, and it's not just me seeing that we have to deal with raw material scarcity in so many different levels, that it's not just up to the question of how big are the players in the network, but it's really a question of how are you able to resituate the question of consumerism. And that's a very uncomfortable thing that I'm addressing here, because obviously the industry is built on the question of re-establishing trends and re-establishing products every half a year. I would suggest a new trend, and the trend would be to abandon trends in general and to see what happens if you come up with your umbrella that is living for longer than 10 years. And where would we end up if this is actually a framework to work within? I think that would be a good starting point on the one hand. And on the other hand, because you mentioned the pineapple leather, it's not just about reusing the derivatives of a biological industry as the leather derivatives, the peel, but really to grow materials, and this is something different. I'm speaking about microorganisms that form plastic. That's a totally different story, and the question would be, what happens if you collaborate with microorganisms in order to grow a sneaker, for example? So that would be a different form of thinking about these problems in a longer scale. Yeah.
I think it's fascinating, give it a trend. I'm going to think about that one. But I think this idea of changing the model of consumerism, I mean, there's a client I was working with in Korea where their business is also based around leasing. And I don't mean leasing cars or big things, but leasing small things, which means the ownership stays with them. You know, they lease the product, they take the product back, they can refurbish the product, then lease it again. They could even, you know, apply different colors, so you have a different, you can apply trends and still keep it some way, you know, without generating waste. Yeah. So
it's quite interesting as an aspect, because in the past, when we look at the linear approach, you know, we used to make something, then someone took it and bought it and then disposed it. It ended up in a landfill or, you know, burned it. And as we're transitioning from this phase of having to own everything to just paying for using it, whether it's shared mobility or you can take that further now with starting it with office furniture or clothes even. You don't have to necessarily own everything. Would that also help this new consumerism, if we want to put it that way, help close the loop and become more circular? Because to me it seems that in the past companies said, well, user centricity, that's important for us. So we asking what the consumer does. But then again, they're always influenced by the industry. So who's really setting the trend here?
Yes. I think it's an interesting point. I mean, ownership and consumerism, I'm a big consumer, I can't lie. I like going shopping. But, I think there is a difference between me wanting to own a washing machine or a car or let's say a vacuum cleaner or a ring or a watch or, a hat or a garment. I mean, I'm more than happy to just lease these bigger products because it's actually much more convenient for me. I don't have to worry about disposal of it. But because, you buy a new refrigerator, you have to get rid of the old one. That's also something that can be as much of a headache as repairing. But so for me, I think that model has to change. I don't see it's a big issue for it to change. I think there's a business
some
case.
industries are built in it. Markus, look at the colors. Colors have trends, right? And then sometimes, these trends change. So when we look at products that are then ideally built to last for, maybe say decades and have multiple users / owners, but they still have the same colors. How can that be integrated?
It's definitely not the same colors. Colors have their own functionality. They send out certain messages for sure. But colors have never been regarded isolated. So you have to if you take a look at colors, you have to take an integrated look. That means taking forms into consideration, taking materials into consideration. So if we really think seriously about sustainability, circular economy, there will be some certain colors, but always in combination and very closely linked to materials, shapes, and functionality of a certain product. It's never been isolated.
And there are materials out there right now that can actually change colors, right? So either temperature could be an influence, or touch, or the environment in general.
Yeah. Let me say one point to what mentioned before is that we lend material. We had samples here on a booth, like water bottles that are hired to companies and bring back to Covestro, or that we hired tarps for trucks, and it comes back to our company. So there are circular solutions. There are also bio-based ingredients in our products, and I think there is a first introduction for all these designers to have a look on this. It's our CQ logo on each of our products, on our products boards or labels. And then you can go to these experts. We have a great team here to go into a deeper discussion with them. But I think there is a great opportunity to fulfill all these requirements here from the stage.
Quite interesting. So it seems to be that listening is actually also an important part of this process when we talk about communicating, not just listen what the other party maybe needs or requires, what does the consumer need. Because, I don't know, as designers, isn't that something that you sort of, that is part of the job description? As a designer, I want to listen to what trends are out there, what people want, what do I want, and then put it all into a certain design?
So the modes of listening are definitely very important, but that doesn't only mean listening to the industry or to the consumer, but also listening to environments. The question of how do they resonate with the products that we design. I really liked your statement of how color is not just something that you put on top of a surface, but it really has an inherent need. And I think we are very much stuck in this, we mentioned it before, this thinking of the gute Form. There's a table, And then we put a certain color on it. So there's like these 2 layers, and then we just paint it, and then it's something else, and that's the design. The design is that someone chose the color on this table, but that there's an inherent modality of what materials require to look like as the freckles. The freckles for me are an amazing example, not because they're a trend of freckles, because I think that can pass, but you recycle a material and it will look different because it's recycled. This is an inherent quality of the material. And if you stay true to it, there's no such question as if this is a trend or not. It's just necessary.
But maybe this is the trend, no trend.
I mean, that's the trend.
Yeah, I would be up for that. This is the only trend I would lend my face for.
All right. So,
But maybe just to add that, we as at RAL, we have a different point of view on that, because we don't talk anymore about a trend, as you mentioned it. We think it's a fundamental change into the way we look at things. So what you mentioned as an example, saying that we need to use more recycled materials, and the shape of a product and the look and feel of a product made from recycled material would bring an added value to the product itself. Yes, but we don't see something like a circular economy or sustainability or something like that as a mega trend or something like that. We see that as a fundamental required change in the way we look at products, we look at services, we look at processes.
Yes.
And maybe that's the way, and the most important point is we need to change the mindset. Before we start rethinking products or something like that, we need to keep in our mind that all the things we do and we undertake are due to make it all more sustainable. And that's the key point for us.
fascinating in this aspect, because then, you know, actually the circular product, the circular economy should be the new normal, and everything else then is like the old way. So at this point, I want to open it up to the audience. Do we have any questions for our panel? Anyone? Yes. Well, we'll get you a microphone, Daniela.
I think we all like the idea of, for example, leasing that came up, or the idea of not owning products but renting them, etc. And yet at the same time, a leasing model at the moment is still very difficult, because in the financial system you constantly need to rate the value of the product when it comes back, because you have to value it in your financial system. If you want to give a discount on bringing a product back, you need to have the discount on your balance sheet the whole time. What, from your visions of how the world could be different and how we could make a circular economy the new normal, what are the most important things around the design that also need to change in order to make the new design possible as mainstream?
I think if we just take plastics, it doesn't matter whether it's plastics for a car or, you know, appliance or something else, but that changes the need of the material, because let's just say, for example, I'm taking a piece of furniture, I'm taking it back from the person who's leasing it, from the consumer, but I need to change the cover because the cover has become damaged. So I can replace that, and I can recycle the old cover. But there has to be some consideration for the degradation of the recycled material, and that can only, you know, go on for so long if you keep a closed loop just for the table, for example. And then you have to keep the color consistency, because if you play by the existing traditional, you know, consumer expectations of consistency all the time, everywhere, then you have to take color consideration into account of recycled content and maintaining that color, or, you know, but I think it's complex. It's not easy, but, you know, it's a challenge. And when there's a challenge, it's an opportunity.
It's quite interesting. So maybe a product could also have an aging process.
Yeah, maybe.
So, you know, when you're getting it, then it had 2, 3, 4 owners before.
Right.
And it had some patent.
Well, like a car.
It's
I mean, you know,
aged now.
classic cars are 25, 30, 40 years old, you know, where the ownership is important as the, you know, I want to know where it came from, and I want to.
Or Fairphone is an example, a little bit beside this topic, but Fairphone, you can change, it's modular designed, you can change
Replace all the
electronic parts, you can change the new technology, but it's yours. the phone is yours for years and not change phones every 2 years. So I think also this topic could be an idea for other products. And then for that, we also need designers that they design modular and think about what's coming behind.
All right. And we have a question coming in from LinkedIn. Chris stated the status of the Wild West in his talk. And so how can companies like RAL help to make it a little bit less wild while keeping the opportunities? Does circular design, and that's an interesting question, does circular design actually need standards?
Yes and no. So the answer is very clear. Standards always give you a kind of orientation and help you to make processes more efficient, which is important for companies as everything is also related to costs and money at the end of the day. So there is no good in doing everything sustainable but getting bankrupt. So the answer in this way is yes. On the other hand, it's no, definitely, because we need to be creative. We need some kind of uncertainty. We need to allow mistakes. If you take a look at research, 90% of the research is a failure. But to get out the 10%, that's important. So there is no clear answer to that, because we need to, if we need to look ahead, we should be daring. We should be courageous. And we should have an open mind to find out what's next. And therefore, I don't really think we need standards. But on the other hand, if it comes to processes and all that kind of stuff, it's really helpful.
May I add something?
Yes.
In terms of standards, I think there's one line in the production that we didn't address yet, and that's where is the product produced, under what circumstances, and where is it disassembled later on, right? So there's one section where we actually definitely need to establish certain standards in order to label a product sustainable. It doesn't help anyone to have a sustainable sneaker if it's produced under terrible conditions in Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
So to dare to look into these conditions, and now I think with the situation in Ukraine, we are very much forced to look into where are the resources coming from, where are the products coming from, how are these production chains actually assembled, is part of the design process. And this again brings the designer into a different position, because we're not only speaking about design as to make a product, but to design the whole production line, the processes behind, the modalities of how people assemble this, because there's still people behind everything that we make, and not to forget about this. And I think their standards, to my point of view, would really make sense.
Absolutely, fully agree.
So before we have standards, we need the transparency in the supply chain and the whole value chain. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yes, Efrat.
A question to Hans. As the topic is visions, it's a complicated question, so I'm sorry for that. But hearing Chris talk about leasing, so there are brand owners that lease their products already, and they are the owners of the product and not the end customer. Could you imagine a future for Covestro or for other material producers where instead of selling your materials to these brand owners to produce the products, you lease the materials? And this will allow you also to have ownership on your materials already in a granulate form, get them back so you know exactly what's in them, recycle them chemically, mechanically. I didn't figure out the business model in my head yet, but just the question that came up, and maybe if you've discussed it in the company or...
I will discuss it in the company. I can say we need partners. We need partners for, it's a huge project. We are staying here to discuss diverse or not diverse. And I could imagine that is one small part of our upcoming business is like doing like that. But overall, I think there are so many different partners, so many different needs, that it's not helpful that Covestro do it themselves.
maybe at some point in the future. We'll figure it out. And the partners aspect is really important because that's what we're talking so much about. You know, crafting connections. That's the motto for this year's K for Covestro, and that's really what it's all about. You know, we talked so much about communication, talking to each other, listening. Just coming together to connect and build a network, understand each other, and you know, we don't have all the answers yet. Maybe it's about the process of finding the answers together, and then you know, it will be probably a multitude of different answers, not one process.
One topic from my side, when I discuss with the lady with the shoe, we are in discussion with what kind of material could be for an product with more numbers. Let me say it in these words.
Like just how to scale it up.
Yeah, scale it up. So and that we are here with a concept coming from so far, and where is the point in between? And that is for me very exciting discussion. Where is this point, and who is coming nearer to this point, and that is K-Fair in my mind.
Yeah, it's K-Fair. It's about the journey.
Yeah.
So we're on the journey to make all of these visions a reality. Thank you so much for coming in today, sharing your insights, your experiences, and thank you for joining us. That was the last talk and panel for today. I hope you have a great rest of the day here at K. And once again, thank you. This is your applause.
Thanks.